So Henry Ford had a deep fascination with using agricultural products in vehicles. We were pretty excited when the Farm Bill said that hemp could be grown in the U.S. for research purposes, and we've started to receive samples of the material over the past 6 months or so. We've frankly been waiting a long time to have access to hemp in this country.
That was Debbie Mielewski, Senior Technical Leader of Sustainable and Emerging Materials at Ford Motor Company in Dearborn, Michigan. And this is the Lancaster Farming Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Herlock, and today we continue talking about industrial hemp. We talked to Debbie Mielewski. Turns out her job basically is to figure out how to make car parts out of plants. So what I love about this conversation today is that it sheds more light on the potential market of industrial hemp. You know, that's what you ask about. You're like, is there a market? If I grow this, who's going to buy it? Well, Ford is going to buy it. Okay, welcome back. Well, Debbie, could you introduce yourself for us?
My name is Debbie Mielewski. I'm the Senior Technical Leader of Sustainable and Emerging Materials at Ford Motor Company Research.
Wow. You've done a lot of work with, biomaterials and things of that nature?
Yeah, so I've invested the last 20 years of my career here at Ford developing greener, better for the planet materials. Some of the things I've discovered are that the materials that we traditionally use that are made from petroleum aren't all that special. We can meet or exceed the properties of those materials with greener substitutes and put them in production vehicles, and the customer will be pleasantly surprised, and it can even be an enhanced experience.
Do you also get into biofuels in your department?
We have a group that looks at biofuels, but my particular interest has been in what the customer sees, touches in their vehicle every day. And I think there's a real appreciation for the whole idea of making the materials more natural, probably healthier for people, and more sustainable for the long run.
Ford Motor Company has a history with hemp, industrial hemp, going back, 80 years or more?
Yeah.
While I don't want to focus on the history, I want to talk about the future, but can you talk a little bit about where the company has been?
Yeah, so Henry Ford had a deep fascination with using agricultural products in vehicles. He looked at soy, he brought the soybean to the Midwest. He was really looking at the future as agriculture and industry always partnering together, using each other's waste material and buying each other's products. So that was a really strong philosophy then, and I think Bill Ford really believes in that philosophy now. So I'm lucky that we have that history here at Ford, and that has allowed us to look at these alternative materials, hemp being one of them that was looked at way back. I think Henry Ford implemented hemp in steering wheels in the plastic resin as a reinforcement. And we've looked at it for a number of components within cars where it's a very strong fiber, and it can certainly be, it can certainly do the job.
All right, so I work for Lancaster Farming newspaper. We're an agricultural paper read mostly by farmers. So we've been doing this podcast for the past 8 weeks or so, looking specifically at industrial hemp. And a few of our guests, have mentioned the auto industry, how they're sort of clamoring for a great supply of hemp. And they've mentioned Ford specifically, because of the history with hemp. And something tells me that you've already done a lot of research on hemp. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes, it's a very strong fiber, high tensile modulus. And so we've always been looking for sources of hemp. And of course, it was very difficult to get hemp other than through the Canadian border. And so we have received samples over the years. We've ground those samples, injection molded, made composite materials out of them. They meet a lot of our requirements, but we always had the issue of very slim pickings as far as where we could acquire hemp affordably. And so we were pretty excited when the Farm Bill said that hemp could be grown in the U.S. for research purposes, and we've started to receive samples of the material over the past 6 months or so.
So let's say the Farm Bill eventually gets passed. It's a little overdue right now, and suddenly there is this crop growing. How much of a need would you have?
Well, there's about 400 pounds of plastic on a typical vehicle, and that number gets bigger every year because of the fact that we want to lightweight. Plastics are inherently lighter than metals, but we need to reinforce them to get the properties out of them. And so there's no better way to lightweight a plastic than use a natural fiber as reinforcement, because our other alternatives, fiberglass, talc, are very dense, very heavy. And so one could imagine that all of that 400 pounds of plastic could be reinforced with a natural fiber like hemp, and it would be quite a significant amount of material if that were the case.
How does hemp compare to some of the other biomaterials you've used, like agave, bamboo, things like that?
So yeah, there is sort of a little ranking system. Some of the fibers have a lot of hemicellulose on them, and they're not as heat stable. And so we have to go through mixing the natural fiber with a plastic material. It has to not burn up, not discolor in extrusion and injection molding processes. And some of the fibers are very delicate, like the agave can caramelize. And we're looking for ways to remove those hemicellulosic materials, but it turns out hemp is quite stable. And so it's one of the fibers that we consider has the most promise for ease of processing, high temperature stability, low odor material when you're doing these high heat processes, and long-term durability. So it is one of our favorites.
So if you could look into your crystal ball, where do you see sort of the industry in 10, 15 years?
So it's really difficult. I always tell people when they come through my laboratory, you would think that doing research to develop brand new novel materials would be the hard part. And it turns out it's not. So we're getting pretty good with this 20-year stretch of designing materials in the lab and inventing, making them work for automotive purposes. But the hard part is the supply chain, the incentive to move to greener materials, and the actual Farm Bill and being allowed to grow hemp here. So all of those things have to come together in order for this vision to occur. And it depends on a lot of factors other than the research in the lab, which I am confident that almost every single plastic material on a vehicle can be made more environmental, and then we could turn around and go back and make them more environmental again. So I think I have a job forever.
Okay. Well, here in Pennsylvania, we're in our second year of growing hemp through the hemp trials that, were made legal through the 2014 Farm Bill. And, we've got this long history of growing hemp in Pennsylvania. We've got whole towns and townships named after it. And so there's no question here that our farmers can grow it. And I think that you can say the same about farmers pretty much anywhere in the United States. But the question the farmers have is, will there be a market? So you think there will be a pretty good market if we can figure out the supply chain?
Yeah, and I think there are many products that can be derived from hemp as well. So hemp oil, hemp milk, and then the fiber would be yet another additional revenue stream for fabric, there's no reason we couldn't make fabrics out of hemp fiber for the automotive industry as well. So I think with plant-based materials, there's endless sort of applications, and a lot of those can be in vehicle. There's carpet, there's carpet backing, There's insulation materials. A lot of those can utilize plants like hemp.
Okay. From what I understand, BMW is using hemp in its baffles for their batteries. Do you know much about that?
So I don't, but I imagine it is an injection molded component similar to what we would envision using hemp for as well.
Can you speculate what the supply chain would look like, from farmer to Ford?
Good question. So in order to, first you'd have to have somebody who collects the fiber from various farms after the other saleable crop or portion would be harvested. And so, for instance, in wheat straw, we take the wheat part, use it for food, and then the straw is collected on the farm. It has to go somewhere to be chopped, because in order to use it in an injection molding process, which is what the majority of our plastic parts use, it has to be a fiber 3 millimeters in length or less. So somebody would have to gather, somebody would have to chop, someone has to compound with plastic materials. And I don't know if that would be our traditional supply chain or someone new. And then someone has to injection mold into a part and ship it to either a component assembly plant or a final assembly Ford-owned plant. So yeah, there's quite a supply chain in there that needs to be established.
Okay, so Ford probably wouldn't contract with farmers directly, but there would be sort of intermediary industries that would grow up around it?
Absolutely. We don't mold, I don't think we mold any of our own plastic parts, maybe some fascias still left over, but everything's done through tier 1s, tier 2s, and tier 3s.
I can't tell where the auto industry stands on climate change. Can you talk a bit about that? I mean, I imagine that's one of the main reasons you're interested in sustainability?
Yeah, so it's not my area of expertise, but I know Ford has been direct in acknowledging that science is correct in saying that all the data points to climate change exists and that we need to do everything within our power to try to minimize our footprint, our carbon dioxide emissions. And so we've announced many new vehicles that will be coming that will be battery powertrains. Sustainable materials is a part of that. Water strategies. I mean, we're really trying to, of course, we want to be a business and we want our business to be sustainable, but we understand that a very important part of that is taking care of the planet. So I'm very proud to say that Ford's been right out there acknowledging that climate change is an issue that humanity needs to address.
So let's say, the Farm Bill passes, hemp gets into production. How soon do you think Ford would really jump on sort of the hemp production bandwagon?
Yeah, so that's another great question. It sometimes takes us years to get a fiber from conception into a particular application in a vehicle. Then it'll take us another year or so to migrate it to other vehicles. And it all depends whether that material is designed for drop-in replacement. And by drop-in, I mean, can we take our hemp-based material and replace a talc-filled or glass-filled directly into the plant? And sometimes you can't do that because the material can't be put into the same mold. Okay. And so it's quicker to design this as drop-in, and that means making the hemp-based material exactly like the petroleum glass-filled material we're replacing, with shrink, with injection molding cycle times, etc. So there's different ways to do it. Usually it makes sense to wait for a program, but that can take years. So our group has been focused on quicker implementation, getting engineers used to the idea of using plant-based and greener materials as quickly as we can. So we tend to design the materials so they can be dropped directly into a program.
And you're in Dearborn, Michigan now?
Yes, so I'm in a laboratory of about 1,000 people. About half of those 500 of them are focused on powertrain, battery, fuel cell efficiencies in regular internal combustion engines. And then the other 500 of us are focused on materials. Some of them are metals and some plastic.
Do you know much about Michigan's effort to grow industrial hemp?
No, I do not.
I imagine they've got some sort of program, but I don't know myself much about it.
Yeah, at this point, we're looking at about 20 different natural fibers in our laboratory for different applications. And a lot of times people will ask me which one is going to be the one, and I say there isn't going to be one. We should use what is available, what is cost effective, and what meets the requirements of all these various levels of parts. So plastic parts go from cup holders that basically do nothing but sit and hold a cup, all the way up to semi-structural components like the console between the two front seats where people have to climb, children have to climb back and forth between. It has to meet those requirements.
Okay.
So I see different fibers fulfilling different applications, and maybe the car of the future really has a whole host of agricultural products in it.
So getting back to Henry Ford and his history with hemp, I've seen some things on the internet about his hemp car, and he had maybe a fleet of vehicles powered by hemp. Is that myth, or is that based in fact?
I don't know that it was a suite of vehicles. They were never widely made for production. So I think he used to have his own set of vehicles that he used to drive and test these materials on. He did have soybean oil included into regular production coatings for vehicles. But it was all about experimenting for him and seeing what advantages there were to agricultural products. One of the famous ones is the car that was used in the Dearborn Days Festival in the 40s. It had hemp in the body panels and soy oil. It was a plastic fender, which nobody had really heard of at the point, and he would take a sledgehammer and show that the plastic was resilient and didn't bend permanently like a steel panel would.
Okay.
So what happened in the case of Henry Ford's efforts was he was getting older, and the World War II ended and petroleum prices went way down. It became more and more cost prohibitive to bring this dream to reality.
You yourself have some history with making plastics out of soybeans. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, plenty.
You were sort of ahead of the curve. Can you tell me that story?
Well, I wouldn't say ahead of the curve because I was unaware that Henry Ford had done this work, believe it or not, when I started in 2000 looking at plant-based materials. And really my whole idea was around the fact that I felt very uncomfortable leading a plastics effort within Ford. I was an environmentalist at home. I was an environmentalist in my heart. And here I am leading this plastics area that everything ends up in landfill. And so I started the work here in the lab in 2000. Took years to get a soy-based foam that met all the specifications for automotive seating. But the real magic was not the 5 or 6 years in the lab. It was when petroleum prices hit $160 a barrel and everybody was clamoring to put soy-based foam on vehicles.
So today you're using a lot of soy products in production?
So every single vehicle built in North America by Ford now includes soy foam seat cushions, backs, and headrests. 6 of our vehicle lines have castor-based foam in the instrument panels. And then we have a host of other wheat straw bins in the Ford Flex and cellulose armrests, a host of other bio-based materials as well. But we're super proud. It's 10 years that we've been putting soy into our seats, and we've used over 500 million soybeans.
And you're just making the foam from the beans, not the rest of the biomaterial of the plant?
Yes. So right now it's soy oil and it's modified. So it has hydroxyl groups added, just like you take petroleum oil and hydroxylate it to make a foam. We took soy oil and hydroxylated it to make a foam. So very, very simple, elementary idea is, oil from the ground could we use oil from a plant instead?
And do you source all of those soybeans domestically?
Those, yes. So all of our soybeans, most of them are Midwestern soybeans.
Okay.
And yeah, we've been trying to make this a global effort as well. But believe it or not, in Asia, soy is a more critical food source.
Right.
So we're looking at different oils to use in Europe and Asia.
Okay. So it sounds like Ford Motor Company and agriculture have a pretty good relationship.
Well, our farmers love the fact that their F-150s have soybeans in the seat cushions and backs. We're thinking about, potentially someday maybe you'll see a package on an F-150 that includes natural fibers from your region or from what you grow. So imagine a wheat straw instrument panel or a rice hull electrical bracket panel. And so that would show the farmers like using their own crops in the vehicles, and they can see it, touch it, and show it off.
Nice. Is Ford involved in any farm equipment production?
We used to have tractors, but we no longer do.
Okay.
No, I don't think we do.
Debbie, is there anything else you want to tell me about your research or about hemp or about your vision for the future?
Well, I guess my vision is a big one, and that's that the materials in our vehicles should have zero impact on the planet. It drives me, so we've been working on this for 20 years, and it drives me crazy that all of the plastic that is used in vehicles ends up in landfill. So we've been trying to find other applications. We've been trying to sort of develop a circular economy where maybe somebody like Coca-Cola has bottles that come back to landfill, and those are one-use bottles, and they make perfect sense to make fabric out of for Ford vehicles. Maybe Ford has a waste product that Coca-Cola can use in their shipping containers. Or I think we really need to do this, and I think that's the real vision for the future. Is there is no waste, there is no landfill. We've all been spoiled in thinking that everything after one use is waste, and it doesn't have to be.
Any final thoughts on industrial hemp?
Well, I think hemp is a great product. I hope that we're able to source hemp quickly and that we can get some applications in our car. I see it as doing some of the higher end composite replacement for vehicles. And we've frankly been waiting a long time to have access to hemp in this country.
In your opinion, is there anything that farmers could be or should be doing now to sort of get ready for this new industry?
Well, I think if they can develop ways to make the supply chain more lean, so can they separate out parts of the plant that wouldn't be used for the composite, the stock? Are there certain varieties that we should be using that are stronger? And, what I found working with farmers over the years is they know more about the types of material that are available and their advantages and disadvantages than we could ever. It would take us years in the lab to do that. And are they interested in being processors? So would they want to take on the chopping part of this so that they would be supplying short fibers to the plastics industry to compound directly? So, they could help the process by potentially taking on some of that work themselves.
In the hemp plant itself, it's made up of different components. Are you looking to use the outside fiber of the stalk or the hurd on the inside?
Right now, in general, with natural fibers, we've been taking the whole thing and grinding it up.
Okay.
Now, plants like bamboo, it's been suggested that the culm, it has different properties at different points. And people are starting to look at stripping the outer, which is more dense fiber but stronger, from the inner, which is not as dense. I think there's a lot to be learned about how to optimize the use of hemp.
Do you think the stigma with marijuana matters at this point?
I think the stigma is starting to dwindle, right? Because a lot of states have legalization on their ballots. I think Michigan does for next week. And as medical marijuana has been found to do wonders for people medicinally. And so I think the stigma has to dwindle and has to go away, and it should be irrelevant. I mean, I don't even know if it matters which plant we use as far as the stock to make these composites.
Do you know if any of the other domestic automakers are experimenting with hemp?
I don't have access to that information. I haven't heard about it. It's funny, the other OEMs seem to have comfort levels with different parts of the sustainable materials realm. So Chrysler many years ago looked at natural fibers, but mostly in Europe for their European vehicles. Toyota generally looks at plastics, plant-based plastics for the resin part. And Ford seems to be the one that is looking holistically. So we don't care if it's the natural fiber, if it's the resin, plastic resin part, as long as it's better for the environment, we're interested.
That's good to hear. Debbie, I thank you so much for your time today. It's been very enlightening to hear what you're up to there.
Thank you. And if you're ever around the Dearborn area, let me know and I'll take you through the lab. You'll be totally fascinated with the different materials we're looking at. Some of them are crazy.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you to the Ford Motor Company, and thank you all for listening to the Lancaster Farming Podcast. I am your host, Eric Herlock, digital editor at Lancaster Farming newspaper. And tune in next week when we talk to the president of a CBD company. All right, send email to us at podcast@lancasterfarming. And until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper. Hey, you made it to the very end. All right. Thanks for sticking with me. Hey, so I had a question the other day about the music on this podcast, and I create all of that myself. I have a little home studio here. I use GarageBand to put these podcasts together, and I do the music, and I hope you like it. Okay, until next time. Bye-bye.